Here is a primal reason why we fear the basement. It is not just the darkness or the damp smell of earth that clings to the concrete. It is the architecture of a grave. When you walk down those stairs, you descending below the surface of the world, entering a space where the living rules, the living room, and the kitchen don't apply. Down there, sounds carry differently. Shadows stretch longer, and things can hide in the corners that you would never tolerate in the light of day. Welcome back to Grim Reality Locks. I am your host, guiding you through the glitches in our safety, the cracks in our reality. If you are new here and you pray but not to face what hides that ties in Derek, make sure to subscribe. Today, we are opening the door to the place you tried to for it. Here are 5 true stories of what was found beneath the floorboards. Story number 1. The Gold Shoots. I have always loved old houses. Here is a romanticism to them, a sense of history that thou just the weird modern construction. So, when I found a Victorian farmhouse in upstate New York that was built in the 1890s, it did not hesitate. The price was suspiciously low, but the real estate matter side the Tuchin belt the market crashing in the remote location. I signed the papers, passed up my apartment in the city, and moved in by Metabur. The first month was idyllic. The leaves were turning the burnt errands, and the air was crisp. I spent my days scrubbing wallpaper on my nice reading by the fireplace. But as number rolled in, bringing the first hard frost, the house began to speak. Old houses make noise. I knew they. The wood expands and contracts. The pipes scream. The radiators hiss like angry snakes. I told myself that every Todd and creek was die house settling against the coming winter. But the noise from the basement were different. The basement was a cavernous, unfinished space with a dirt floor in some sections and cracked in others. It was divided into small, windowless rooms that felt like prison cells. One of these rooms was the old coal chute, a small chamber where coal would have been shoveled in from the outside 100 years ago. I really went down there. The ceiling was low, forcing me to hunch over, and the air was thick with the smell of wet stone and melt. It started on a Tuesday night. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard a dragging sound. It was coming from the vents. It sounded like something heavy being pulled across stone. Scrape. Pass. Scrape. Scrape. I sat up, holding my breath. My first thought was a raccoon. We were out at the country, after all. I grabbed a flashlight and walked to the hallway vent. The sound stopped immediately. I waited for 10 minutes, shivering in my pajamas, but heard nothing else. I convinced myself it was the boiler kicking on and shaking the pipes. 2 weeks later, the blizzard hit. It was one of those storms the swallows the world howl. By St. Paul's meridian, the snow was already 2 feet deep against the front door. The wind was howling so loud it shook the window panes in their frame. Around 9 o'clock at night, the power flickered and died. The silence that followed was deafening. Without the hum of the refrigerator, the roar of the furnace, the house felt enormous and hollow. I lit a few candles in the kitchen and decided to check the fuse box in the basement, hoping it was the heart breaker, mace of phenol lime. I opened the basement door. The air rushing up from the dark was freezing, much colder than usual. I stepped down the wooden stairs, the candle in my hand casting long, dancing shadows against the stone walls. Creak, I froze on the 3rd step. The sound had come from the bottom of the stair. It was the distant sound of a boot shifting on grit. Hello. I called there. My voice sounded small and pathetic in the damp air. Silence. I told myself I was being paranoid. The one outside was battering the house. It was probable just a draft knocking something. I descended the rest of the way, my heart hammering against my ribs. I reached the fuse box on the far wall. It was dead. The main breaker and trip the valve was out from the grind. I turned to go back upstairs, but my candlelight caught something on the floor near the entrance to the cold shoot room. It was a wrapper. A bright red wrapper. I walked over and picked it up. It was a fresh wrapper from the protein bar. The brand was I bought in bulk and plucked in the pantry upstairs. My stomach shrugged. I looked at the door to the cold chute. It was oozily kept shut with a rusty latch, but now it was hanging slightly ajar. The darkness, thicker than the rest of the basement, seemed to spill out of it. I should have run. Every instant in my body screamed at me to run upstairs, lock the door, and get in my car. But I was frozen by morbid curiosity. I pushed the door open with the toe of my boot. The candlelight fleeted the small room. In the corner, nestled behind a massive, defunct iron furnace, was a nest. It was a pile of dirty blankets, some of my old towels from the laundry room, and a sleeping bag I didn't recount. Surrounding the bedding were dozens of empty food wafers, empty water bottles, and the small bucket that smelled distinctly of ebony and human waste. But the most terrified detail wasn't the map. It was the warmth. I reached out and touched the sleeping bag. It was warm. Someone had been sleeping here. Someone had been lying directly beneath me fit for weeks, listening to me walk, listening to me sleep, handing me food. And the worms meant they hadn't been gone long. I spun around, shining the candlelight frantically into the dark corners of the main basement. The shadows jumped and twisted. And from the top of the stairs, Electricity heard the click shot. The latch slide home. I was locked in the dark with whoever had been living in my cold chute. I screamed. He drops the candle. The flame went out. In the total, suffocating darkness of the basement, I heard breathing. But what wrecked everything, coming from the far corner of the room near the old water heater. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I scrambled toward the small across window on the far side of the basement. It was painted shut and high on the wall. I climbed onto a stack of old paint cans, smashing my fist against the glass. I could hear footsteps rushing toward me across the concrete floor. Heavy, wet footsteps. I smashed the glass with my elbow, ignoring the pain as shards sliced my skin. The wine and snow blasted into my face. I pulled myself up, scrabbling for purchase on the frozen ground outside. Hands gripped my ankle. Strong, dirty hands. I kicked back wildly. My heel connected with something soft of face. It was a chronic faint, and the grip loosened. I hauled myself out into the snow, tumbling into the 3-foot drift. I ran through the blizzard to my neighbor's house, a quarter of mile down the road, while self-smeating and freezing. The police arrived an hour later. They found the basement door unlocked. The window broken. The nest in the cold shoes was there, but the person was gone. They found scratch marks on the underside of my floorboards, directly beneath my bed. I sold the house 3 months later. I took a loss. I now live in a third-floor apartment in the city. I do not have a basement, and I never will again. Story number 2. The Storm Shelter. If you grew up in Oklahoma, you know the color of the sky before a tornado. It is not gray, and it is not black. It is a sickly, bright sheet of green. It looks like the sky is infected. I live on 40 acres of land, Tushin Pine, both sides of Tulsa. My nearest neighbor is a mile down a dirt road. It is quiet out here, peaceful, until May rolls around. 10. Every afternoon feels like a gamble. On May 21st, the siren stopped welling at 6:15 past meridian. I was in the barn feeding the horses when the air pressure dropped so suddenly my ears popped. The Y died instantly. The birds stopped singing. That is, boys, the worst part. The silence before the roar. I ran for the storm cellar. It is an old-fashioned concrete bunker built into a hellble 50 yards from the main house. It was built in the 1950s, and it showed. The door is heavy steel, rusted around the edges, and set at a 5-degree angle to the crown. I hauled the heavy door even and practically threw myself down the concrete steps. The one picked up, screaming like jet engine, and held a sigh of golf balls started hammering the metal door as I slammed it shut above me. I slid the heavy iron bolt you placed, locking myself in. The cellar was pitch black. The bolt that easily hung from the ceiling had burned about months ago and key a high considerable it. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating the small, crumbling space. It was about 8 feet by 8 feet, lined with wooden shelves that held jars of peaches my grandmother came years ago. It smelled of damp earth and rot. I sat on the wooden bench against the wall, my heart pounding in my throat. Above me, the storm raged. It sounded like a freight train was driving drivel over my head. The brisk laminate goal against the steel door bang, Todd screech. I squeezed my mouth shut and prayed the latch would hold. After out 20 minutes, the roar began to fade. The hell stopped it. The wind died down to a low moan. The storm had paced. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. I stood up to slide the bolt back and check the damage high. But before I could touch the lock, the handle turned. I froze. The handle on the outside of the jar rated slowly to the left, then to the right. The heavy steel door rattled against the bolt I had slid into place. Hello. I called out. I'm in here. Is anyone out there? I assumed it was a neighbor checking on me, or maybe a firefighter. No answer. The handle turned again, more violently this time. Clang. Clang. Hey! I wailed louder, stepping closer to the stairs. Stop it! I am unlocking. I reached for the bolt, but then I stopped. My hand hovered inches from the metal. There were no footsteps. The storm cellar door is heavy steel. When you walk on the concrete paved about it, or when you step on the door itself, it resonates. You can hear boots crunching on the gravel. You can hear weight shifting. The handle was moving, but there was no sound of anyone standing outside. It was as if a ghost was trying to turn the knob. 10. The scratching started. Long, slow scratches against the metal, like someone dragging a knife down the face of the jar. Scritch. 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 The hair on my arm stood up. I backed away from the stairs, retreating into the deeper darkness of the cellar. Who was there? I whispered. The scratching stopped. For a full minute, there was silence. I stood there, shaking, my phone flashlight trembling in my hand. I decided I wasn't going to open the door. I waited. I would wait until I heard a car or sirens or sunlight. I backed up until my legs hit the wooden shelf on the back wall. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. I swept the flashlight beam around the small rooms to myself. I looked at the floor, the walls, the shelves, and I saw it. In the corner to the right of the stairs, tucked behind a stack of old potting sobex, was a pair of shoes. Dirty, mud-caked sneakers. My breath got in my throat. I slowly moved the beam up. Connected to the sneakers were legs, covered in tattered denim jeans. I moved the light up further. A torso wrapped in a dark, oversized hoodie, and then a face. A man was crouching in the corner of my storm cellar. He was a passerby thin, his skin pale and greasy. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, staring directly at me. His mouth was stretched into a wide, silent grin that showed too many teeth. He had been down here the whole time. When Lee ran in. When I locked the door. When he sat in the dark listening to this storm. He had been sitting 5 feet away from me, watching me in the dark. I realized then that the person outside wasn't trying to break into Dak. They were trying to bet him out. Or maybe they were trying to make sure I didn't leave. The man in the corner raised a finger to his lips. He has. My phone battery died. The light went out. I was alone in the dark, locked in a concrete box with a smiling man. Story number read. Sub-level 4. I went to graveyard shifting a massive state university in Ohio for 6 years. It was an easy job for the most part. Walking the quad, checking lockers, taking out drunk freshmen. Yeah, part of the job nobody when it was a steam tunnels. The university sits on top of a labyrinth of utility tunnels that carry steam tunnels, electricity, and fiber optics to every building on campus. We call that the vents. It is hot, loud, and claustrophobic down there. It was 3 a.m. on a Tuesday in February. The campus was dead silent. My radio crackled. Dispatch told me there was a pressure alarm in the boiler room under the old science library. That building is the oldest on campus, built in 1912. I took the service elevator in the loading dock. It was one of those massive industrial file elevators with the scissored metal gate you have to push at manually. The control pallet and cow and IDA's 1. Ground. Sub-P basement 1. And sub-basement 2. I pressed the button for sub-basement 2. The Lychee drowsed tether, and the car lurched downward. The distance was low. I watched the brick wall of the shaft slide upward past the gate. I paced the basement. 10 sub-basement 1. The car kept going. I waited for the jolt of the stop at sub-basement 2, but it never came. The elevator kept moving down. I frowned and looked at the panel. The light for sub-basement 2 was lit, but we had definitely passed it. The air in the shaft changed. The smell of grease and old dust was replaced by subjective, like a hospital. Amargu. After another full minute of sending far deeper than the building's foundation should have fobbed pushing it for a shutter, but there was no button for this floor. The metal gate rattled open automatical. I hesitated. My radio was that step down here. I unclipped my flashlight and stepped out. I expected dirt floors and steam pipes. Instead, I stepped onto linoleum tile. The hallway was wide, painted a sterile cream color. Floors and less hum ever have, but they were dim, flickering with a sickly elf hue. It looked like an office building from the 1970s. Security? I called out. Is anyone down here? My voice echoed flat. There was on either side of the hallway. Heavy, steel doors with no numbers and no windows. I walked down the hall, the sound of my boots squeaking on the tile. I felt a deep instant of rumpus. This floor did not exist on any blueprint I had ever seen. At the end of the hall was a double door, they're slightly ajar. I pushed it open. It was a fire room. Rows and rows of mouth-filling cabinets stretched back into the gloom. In the center of the room was a wooden desk. On the desk was a lamp, casting a pool of warm light on a scattering of papers. I walked over to the desk. I touched Key's ceramic mug sitting next to the lamp. It was hot. There was fresh black coffee in it. Steam was still rising. Someone was here. Right out. I looked at the papers. It was a law book. and written in neat, cursive blue ink. I began to read the entries. 0200 hire subject entered the license library via the loading dock. 0230 hire subject approached the flight elevator. 0235 hours subject initiation. My blood ran cold. The subject was me. I looked him at the final entry written at the bottom of the page. The ink was still wet. 0245 hours subject has breached the containment zone. Immediate lockdown protocol. A loud metallic klaxon began to play. It was an alarm. It was a mechanical gliding sound coming from the walls. The heavy steel doors in the hallway slammed shut, one by one. Bang. 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 Approaching the room I was in, I ran. I dropped my flashlight and sprinted back down the hallway toward the elevator. The lights overhead popped and shattered, plunging the corridor into its nest. I could hear heavy, rhythmic footsteps coming from the other end of the hall, coming from the shadows behind the flying beat. I threw myself into the elevator and slammed the gate shut. I smashed the button for the ground floor. Nothing happened. The footsteps were getting closer. I could hear the rustle of stiff fabric. I hit the button again and again. Finally, the jurors called. The car jerked upwards, ups, ace, finger cantreds broke the grid and swiped in my face. I recalled the falling back against the wall. The elevator ascended. When I got back to the ground floor, I ran to my car and drove home. I quit the next day via email. I never went back to pick up my last paycheck. But sometimes when I am in an elevator and it stutters between floors, be manic. I know that if it goes down too far, there is a floor waiting for me where the coffee is still hot. Story number 4. The False Wall. My girlfriend, Saray, and I decided to take a weekend trip to Portland, Oregon. We wanted to experience the rainy season, visit some bookstores, and just disconnect. We found highlighted rated rental property in a historic neighborhood. It was a beautiful craftsman bungalow. The host, a man named Gary, met us at the door. He was overly friendly, lingering a bit too long when showing us around, but we brushed it off as him just being a lonely older guy. The rental was for the garden suite, which was essentially the finished basement of the house. It had private entrance, a small kitchenette, and a bedroom. The first night was fine. We fell asleep to the sound of rain hitting the pavement outside. But the second night, things got weird. Around 2 a.m., I woke up freezing. The heating vent was working, but there was a distinct, icy draft hitting me directly in the face. I pulled the vid up and tried to ignore it, but it was persistent. It felt like a window was open. I got out of bed and walked around the room, using my phone screen for light. The windows were still tied. The door was locked. I chased the cold air to the far wall. Here was a last built-in bookshelf filled with old encyclopedias and decorative. When I stood in front of it, the draft was strong enough to make the hair on my arms stand up. It was coming from the gap between the bookshelf and the wall. I assumed it was just poor insulation. I went back to bed. The next morning, Sarah went out to grab coffee, and I decided to take a closer look. In the daylight, I noticed puff marks on the hardwood floor right in front of the shelf. Semicircular scratches, like the shelf had been dragged back and forth. I gripped the side of the bookcase and pulled. It swung open smoothly on silent hymns. It wasn't a bookshelf. It was a door. My heart started thumping. Behind the shelf was a dark, narrow space. It wasn't a utility closet. It was a hole-about section of the foundation, 12 feet wide and 10 feet long. The air inside was still and smelled of stale tobacco smoke. I stepped inside. The floor was covered in a cheap rug to muffle footsteps. At the far end of the narrow tunnel, there was a single wooden chair. It was facing the wall. I walked over to the chair and sat down. Directly in front of me, set into the wall, was a pane of glass. Through the glass, I could see the bedroom. I could see the on my bed. I could see my own suitcase on the floor. I could see the balloon door. It was a two-way mirror. The large, decorative mirror hanging on the wall in our bedroom's the one we had dressed in front of. The one facing the bed was a window into the sitting room. I felt a wave of mazes so strong he almost threw up. The chair was worn. The cushion was depressed, molded into the shape of some hoe, sat here often. On the floor next to the chair was a small side table. On it sat a notepad and a pen. I picked up the notepad. It was a lot of times and days. October 10th. Guest arrived. Female, blonde. Mill, brown hair. Argument at 10 p.m. October 11th. Lights out at 11:30. Sleeping. I flipped to the last page. Current guests. Sarah and Mark. Lights out at midnight. They sleep with the band on. My hands were shaking so hard I dropped the page. I looked down at the floor. Beneath the chair, I saw a small red light blinking. It was a battery pack connected to a webcam. The camera was tapped to the glass, pointed directly at the bed. I grabbed the camera and wrapped it on the wire. Then I heard footsteps directly above my head, specifically on the floorboards of the main house kitchen, which were right out of this hidden room. The footsteps stopped. Then a heavy door slammed upstairs. I ran up the hidden room, grabbed Sarah, who was just walking in the front door with the coffees, and we drove straight to the police station. They arrested Gary an hour later. They found thousands of hours of footage on his hard drive. He had been renting that basement for 12 years. We a part of a clash and lawsuit failed. But no amount of money fixes the feeling you get when I look into a mirror. I always wonder who is sitting in the dark on the other side. Story number 5. The roof cellar. When my grandfather died, he left me everything. His truck, his savings account in his cabin dip in the Appalachian foothills of eastern Kentucky. It was a piece of land densely wooded and silent, miles away from the nearest paved road. But along with the deed, he left a letter. It was handwritten, shaky and bright. It said, "Enjoy the peace. Fix the roof. But whatever you so, never open the rose cellar in the backyard. Just leave it buried." I should have listened. I know that now. But I was 25, driving and curious. The cabin was in decent shape, but the property was overgrown. About 50 yards behind the back porch, half swallowed by kudzu vines, was the root cellar. It was a mound of earth with a heavy oak door set into the side of the house. The doorless coordinates ye wide for the cam, spub for my cutfixes its tea. It seemed excessive for a place to store potatoes and cannabis. For the first week, I ignored it. I spent my time clearing brush and drenching whiskey on the porch. But the mystery gnawed at me. White Lux. What's their money down there? Guns. On Hammett Tuesday afternoon, the curiosity won. I drove into town and bought a pair of bolt cutters. It took me 20 minutes to snap through the rusted on. When the last lock fell, the chain rattled to the ground with a heavy thud. I pulled the handle. The wood was swollen from years of rain, but with hurrying, it grown open. I expected the smell brought in vegetables. Instead, I was hit with a blast of cool, dryer. It smelled like stale zone in old fabric. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped inside. It was not a root cellar. Here were no shelves. Here were no jars. It was a tunnel. The walls were reinforced with timber beams and corrugated metal. The floor was spectered, worn smooth by years of foot traffic. And it went dip. It slaved downward, heading away from the cabin, straight into the dark heart of the hill. I walked the beam of my light damped over the wooden supports. I counted my steps. 50, 100, 200. This was an engineering marvel. My grandfather, a solitary old man, had dug a tunnel over 300 years long. The air grew colder. Final leveled out an end, at a wooden ladder leading to after northern ceiling. I take my internal compass. I have walked north. That was direction of the nearest property at Henderson Place. Mr. Henderson was a recluse who had vanished 10 years ago. The police said he likely wandered off into the woods and died of exposure, or maybe skipped on to fight the dips. His house had been sitting empty and bored ever since. I climbed the ladder. It didn't squeak. It was willed. I pushed up on the trapdoor. It wasn't locked. I emerged in a basement. No, a dark, dusty basement. This room was furnished. There was a single cot in the corner with a mattress. There was a bucket. There was a metal tray with a plate on it. And on the walls there were scratches. Thousands of them. Markings that looked like someone had been counting days. I swung my flashlight around. On a small table sat a pile of newspaper. I picked up the one on top. It was dated 3 weeks ago. My grandfather had been dead for 2 weeks. My stomach churned dead. This wasn't a guest room. It was a cell. I walked up the stairs leading up to the main house. The door at the top was heavily fortified with a diblock's fullest pipe and knife. No. I looked closer. The lock was installed backward. It was locked from the kitchen side upstairs. Weaver was down here, can get out into the house. Their only exit was the tunnel. The tunnel that led to my grandpa's backyard. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked at the cot again. Underneath it, I saw a pair of glasses. Thick rim of glasses. I recognized them. I had seen them in missing person posters when I was a teenager. He belonged to others. Anderson. He hadn't wandered off. My grandfather hadn't just built a tunnel. About a feeding tube. He had been keeping a neighbor in the basement of his own empty house, traveling underground to feed him, to torment him, to do God knows what, design decade. And the newspaperman Henderson was all until very recently. Maybe until the day my grandfather died. I heard a sound from the tunnel behind me. A shuffle. I spun around. The tunnel mouth was dark, but I realized nothing terrifying. I had left the root cellar door even back at my cabin. If anyone else knew about this, my grandfather had an accomplice. If Henderson was still down here, hiding in the dark of the tunnel I just walked through. I didn't investigate further. I scrambled up the ladder, back into the tunnel, and ran. I ran until my lungs burned. I burst out into the sunlight of my backyard and slammed the heavy oak door shut. I jammed a piece of rebar for the handles to lock it. I called the police. They found the tunnel. They found the room under the Henderson house. But they didn't find Mercer. Henderson. The tunnel had a branch abyss in the dark. As I passed as the light dipped into the limestone caves of the mountain. They never found him. But sometimes at night, when I'm packing up the cabin to sell it, hear thumping on the bottom of the root cellar dear. Someone is knocking, and we went to come back in. We like to think the Earlhams are our castles. Head-ons, we lock the front door, we're safe from the world outside. But we forget to the house is the box sitting in the dirt, and the dirt goes down for miles. Whether it is a stranger living in your cold chute, a camera behind your mirror, or a tunnel camel connecting you to a crime scene, the truth is that we are never truly alone. Terror is always a layer beneath us. A silverware, the things we repress and the things we fear, wait for the lights to go out. Check your basements tonight. Check the vents. And if you hear a noise beneath the floorboards, do not assume it is just the house settling. It might be the house waking up. If you want to keep these locks open, leave a like and subscribe to Grim Reveille Lex. Let me know in the comments which story kept you up tonight. Stay safe.